If you have the fabricator that is different from the installer, you need a solid relationship, a solid track history, right? Because they need to know the system. They need to know the ins and outs. Otherwise, yes, you can end up in these tricky conditions.
And we have a curtain wall expert on the call from Permasteelisa, who might have a lot of experience working with, especially in the new construction front here in New York, but no direct experience working with you. So maybe that's a good opportunity to introduce you and talk a little bit about your role at Permasteelisa.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Andrea Zani, Sustainability and Building Physics Leader for Permasteelisa North America. Been in Permasteelisa for 3.5 years now. Basically managing the team that handles all thermal calculation, acoustic calculations, and for the past 2 years also all calculation related to embodied carbon, how we present, introduce, design low carbon facades in new construction, as you said, in unitized curtain wall, and also kind of driving the sustainability agenda and the decarbonization strategy for Permasteelisa North America. So pretty broad spectrum, a lot of stuff going on at this point, but super exciting.
So you're on the West Coast, right?
I am on the West Coast, yeah.
And do you find a lot of your focus, because obviously Permasteelisa is a global facade provider, so a lot of your focus kind of climate or market specific, or are you looking at the unitized curtain wall sector as sort of holistically to apply to all?
We definitely apply to all. Right now we have group initiatives that kind of span across the entire Permasteelisa group. So Europe, Asia, Middle East, and North America to develop common strategy on how to deliver high performance and low carbon facades, and generally drive the business towards a more sustainable economy. So it's a really group effort that then we customize for the specific markets, right? As you can imagine, we have standards. We have small things that differs, right, from our colleagues in Europe. So we have to tweak things and adapt to our market, but the strategy is definitely global. We need to act globally if we want to do an impact from our side.
I would think, I mean, there's so many areas we can go in this conversation, from prefabrication to reducing costs to fabrication location to managing subcontractors to embodied carbon to thermal to all this stuff. But I guess to start, and I'm sure you hear this all the time, what's your first means or response? And maybe this is evolving over time. What's your first means of response of replying to the objection that curtain wall and all glass or highly glazed facades cannot perform well thermally?
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, we get these a lot, and especially recently, I would say in the last 2 years, right, with some new building codes and energy codes across the United States that really try to push the boundaries and kind of lean towards a more opaque envelope, right? So yeah, we definitely had a lot of this conversation last few years with the GCs and architects. First of all, right, we try to optimize our system, right? We're working on many different approaches to enhance the performance, to kind of get as close as possible to some of these more opaque, mega panels or traditional kind of construction. And then I think that always a good selling point is the ease of installation, the quality of the final product. Air tightness, it's a really good one because, right, we have a really high level of control, super stable results across tens of projects. It's always there, the value of air tightness. So that's always a big driver, especially in Northeast, where it's definitely really important. So every time it's slightly different, the conversation, but those are the big selling point that we always try to use to convince the client that yes, you will have maybe a little bit less performance in certain areas, but we can offset them and we're always ready to kind of try to push the boundaries. And what we offer is, always really high-end analysis and to really dive into the performance so they know what to expect and they're sure that they're getting that performance.
Oh, so I hear this all the time from the window and window wall side that whatever material your framing elements or assemblies are, anybody for the most part has access to the same glass assemblies and center glass and edge of glass performance criteria. But how do you rid of the objection around aluminum and that somebody might write off aluminum immediately before even doing the analysis? I guess let's start from there and then maybe dig deeper into some of the more advanced technologies when it comes to means of pressure plate in captured curtain wall systems and or the different like thermal break technologies you've been exploring.
Yeah, I think that we didn't get a lot of counter argument on aluminum yet. Fortunately, I think that they're starting asking more about timber, and we are exploring, for example, timber for a new line of our system using timber, and hopefully we can introduce it pretty soon in the North American market as well. But I think that our clients still feels pretty strong about aluminum. Is, as you said, right? It's really trying to push and optimize the thermal breaks, how we detail the transitions between the opaque and the vision part. We're proposing quite a bit now, fully gasketed systems with the dual durometer gaskets, so you still have a really solid and nice crisp edge, but the performance is much better than a typical, small thermal breaks that sometimes we can fit in the limited space that we have. So that's kind of where we try to move the needle, and then we are definitely exploring, as you said, like new ways to bring the facade into like a next generation and a next level performance.
Why timber?
Timber, because right now it's sustainability drives a lot of conversations and has that aura of being a really sustainable material that can stock carbon, right? So it's kind of a carbon negative material per se, so has a lot of interest. But aluminum, right, it's fully recyclable. We know how to disassemble it. We know how long it's going to last. So I think that we need to have those conversations, right, with clients. Aluminum or timber, let's say, right, the two main ones. I don't think that timber is always the right option, right? I think that it's project specific. I think that it's project specific, condition specific. Sometimes makes sense, sometimes it doesn't. So I think that we need to demystify a little bit also that it's timber. It's the element that is going to solve the problem about the carbonization. It's not. It's actually improving design, optimizing the design, and make sure that we make the most out of the aluminum that we use, in my opinion, too.
I understand the intrigue in at least exploring the conversation of going mass timber structure just to lighten the structure, but I don't know how I feel about I guess your structural framing elements being made out of mass timber. I mean, wouldn't you think there would be more interest to explore composites or a fiberglass or more vinyl or some other means of achieving that? Is it primarily driven by thermal performance, or as you said, is it just this perception that a mass timber facade must be better performing?
Yeah, I think that it's a bit about perception. I think that sometimes they perform better than aluminum one, but not all the time. And sometimes you cannot even use them just for fire concerns, right? So it's not kind of the holy grail that kind of will solve all the problems, right? I think that we can still do really high performance facades with aluminum composite, aluminum plus maybe fiberglass or a new generation of composite. I think that there are a lot of ways that we can achieve really high performance using more traditional material, let's say. And I think that, you know, something that I always bring up with our clients, architects, is you have a lot of impact on, you know, thermal performance. Now that we're talking about that, just in terms of modulation of your facade, right? If you do really skinny piece of glass and really skinny spandrels, right, your performance is going to be really, really bad. So playing and optimizing how much framing you have, um, the unit width, the unit height, and play with that, playing with the overall, you know, pattern of the facade, you can still achieve a pretty high performance, just minimizing transition, minimizing thermal breakages, right? So I think that right now we're focused on, you know, a lot of window to wall ratio, so we have a lot of spandrels, just, you know, maybe, and create that movement in the facade, we end up with really small spandrels that really affect us. So maybe, you know, we need to start there. Where you actually have a lot of impact is how to achieve a good window to wall ratio in a smart and efficient way, in my opinion. And then you go into the system level, and in the detailing and the materiality of framings and substructure.
I get it when it comes to optimizing cost, and really I guess I would say perception of Permasteelisa is you operate really in the high-end, highly customized, unitized facade world. What happens when you have a client or end user that really wants to work with you, but it's a budget project or more standardized, unitized assembly? I guess let's start from, I always find it interesting when you break down, like, what are the major cost drivers for you could call it any unitized assembly, and you're going to have a breakdown between like materials, so your aluminum, your gaskets, accessories, the glass, your soft costs, so the engineering effort, which might be higher, and then obviously installation, fabrication, and freight, and so forth. So,
Right.
what are some of like the really big, heavy cost drivers from your world, and like how much engineering effort is really required in these projects? And if it is a more standardized product, if you think you can go to market with a very efficient system, or at that point, if it just becomes a race to the bottom and they should just go with a lower cost provider.
Yeah, it's a, you know, it's a lot of things, right? I think that we yes, we do a highly customized project, right? But there is a big range. Right? There are ones that are really engineer intense. So, you know, like the effort and the hours that goes into engineering that project, that facade, it's really, really high, and that impact the cost. You know, usually when approach a project, as you said, right, material is the first one, right? The second one, when you talk about custom facades, is the fabrication, right? It's trying to optimize as much as possible the system that you can fabricate as quickly as possible, right? So it's really going into the detail and say, okay, let's optimize how we assemble the unit together, minimize the number of machining and machine part that we have to go through, right? Those takes a long time if you have a lot of small and custom machining that you kind of need to reprogram every time if it's a custom facade. So finding this optimization, it's really important to drive down the cost, because it just goes much quicker through the factory, right? And that's a big cost driver for us. So finding those optimizations, it's crucial. And then of course, unit size has an impact on both on the line, on the fabrication, and then transportation, right? If you are above, let's say, the 7 feet wide, 7.5 feet, right? You need to use the flat bed less efficiently, so you have a higher cost of transportation and so on. So we always factor all of this stuff in, and try to optimize also how we bring stuff on site. And then installation really varies on projects, right? As you can imagine, based on the facade, based on the geometry, it's really different project to project. But we always tackle it straight at tender level. We have always our site guys that goes through what's the best installation method for this project, how we can do it safely, right? That's always the first priority that we have, and then how we do it, how we can do it efficiently. So kind of broad answer to your question, but I think that it's material and fabrication if I have to highlight the two of them.
So I've been to the Blue Tech facility in Montreal, but I hadn't spent much time in the Connecticut facility before it was shut down. Do you tap into other manufacturing facilities around the world?
Yeah, so we have a Modesto facility to cover um, some of the California projects in tandem with the Montreal facility that you mentioned. And then, of course, we strongly collaborate with our European factory as well to cover specific projects like the factory in Italy where we have all our metal panel division, so aluminum, stainless steel. We have highly skilled, amazing people that can do anything with stainless and aluminum, so we can prefabricate all our complex panel there. In addition to typical unitized, and then we bring it to the United States, and then of course Germany, where we have the steel fabrication part of the business, and in addition to the Netherlands, we have also the high performance um, part of the assembly lines that can deliver closed cavity facades. This is one of our highest performing system available across the world. So those are specialized in these kind of high-end and high performance facades. So based on the project, based on the client, based on the location, we can tap into different factories, different procurement strategies. So that's one of the main advantage that we have, that we're not stuck in North America. We can tap into different markets to bring the most cost efficient and best solution for the client.
Which is probably very advantageous, especially from a cost standpoint, to be able to weigh out different labor rates the around the globe. But do you get any pushback? Maybe the highly custom unitized current wall world is a little bit different in that, I see producers from China and Mexico and Turkey delivering projects here stateside. In that world, call it, is it more accepted to utilize a global supply chain? And do you get clients pushing back in terms of concerns about late deliveries or managing overseas supply?
Yeah, definitely. We got some pushback, especially during and after COVID, especially just after COVID, where everyone experienced that disruption through COVID. We had some of those experiences as well, where unfortunately they were stuck on the container ship for a month, right? But it's kind of easing up a little bit. I think that they're getting more comfortable again to a global supply chain, and we when we approach a project with our tender team, they do always a fantastic job at exploring and explaining the clients different strategies that we can bring to the project, and also discuss with them and saying which one you feel more comfortable with. And maybe we highlight, okay, these are maybe the items, maybe the glass in that particular case, right? It's a highly critical item that they want more control. So I said, okay, we can do supply chain in the US for the glass, for example, right?
So what about means of or location of assembling the facade versus where the glass is procured from? Do you try to sort of keep those two facilities within close proximity? Meaning, what if you're producing the unitized curtain wall units in Thailand, but they want to buy from a glass vendor in North America and the job's being shipped to LA? Are you
Yeah.
sending glass units to Thailand just to send them back here domestically? How is that sort of, will you push back and say we'll want to work with a glass vendor closer to the manufacturing facility?
Yes, usually yes. We try to optimize it that way. For North America specifically, we don't do any more, Asia supply chain or fabrication in Asia. It's all North America or Europe. So the main scenario, for example, is or you get the glass from Europe, you fabricate in Europe, and then we ship everything fabricated to the US. Or most of the time is we procure the glass in Europe, and we ship it to the US. We fabricate in the US, we assemble in the US, and then we ship locally into the US. Like these are the two main strategies. And then of course, if we find the right supplier in the US, then try to push the US glass supplier close to our factory, then ship to site.
Do you look at the residential market any differently than the commercial office market in terms of facade design and how you deliver?
There is always a little bit higher risk on the residential market, right? So I think that we approach it slightly different. I would leave it to our project directors and tender people to dive into the details of contract stuff. But your approach is slightly different from a contractual standpoint. From an execution standpoint, it's pretty similar. I would say. We maybe pay attention to some additional attic stock that we want to keep available, some extra care on few things, but overall
I mean,
it's more on the
more
contract
so
side.
like integration of things like operable windows or terrace doors, and how Permasteelisa views assembling on their own versus buying out from other producers, and how that might impact your production process.
Yeah, that definitely, if it's nothing crazy, we usually work with local suppliers for windows, doors. I think that we like to work with few players in the industry. We have a good relationship, and we usually do that. If there is something really custom, really one thing, sometimes we do it in house in Europe, but most of the time we find a local partner to that supply us windows and doors, and then we integrate in our factory, and then we ship to site. That's usually a solid way to deliver the project.
How does the curtain wall industry, and this is very vague, but how do you view window wall versus curtain wall?
We usually steer away. We're not that competitive on window wall. I think that if there is the right project where the window wall it's complex in some, right, maybe you have transitions, you have interesting um, you know integrations with spandrels and fills, and maybe it's a portion of a wider and broader unitized facade. Definitely, we like to do those. If it's just window wall, sometimes it's hard for us to play the same the same game of other players in the industry. Um, I guess short answer is we really like unitized curtain wall.
I get it. It's easy. It's simple. Well, it's simple from an installation standpoint. It's not simple in nature and design. How do you deal with leaks? What are some of the most common causes, issues, and like what are some personal lessons learned that you've taken away and now integrate into design?
You know, I think that on the typical facade, right, on the typical unitized field of the facade, right, we have our double leg system that is kind of our trademark in the industry, that we feel really comfortable that's been developed over the years and fine-tuned over the years, and always deliver really high level of confidence and performance in terms of water performance and condensation and so on. So that's one thing, right? That we really push our clients to implement in all the projects, just because of the history and how reliable it is. And then transitions are always the critical part, right? So trying to, if there are really complex transitions that happen often to the project, we usually work with the architect to try to implement in the PMU so that the crew can get used to that transition, and test it on the PMU. You cannot always do that. So what we always do during our 3D and fabrication modeling, where we model every unit on the job. We model all of these transitions, right? So we can really dive into see how the unit comes together, where is the critical part of that connection, and then as soon as on site, early testing, right before it's too late that you cannot move and check things. So that's kind of how we usually approach it.
Well, I think that's a good point, but I've spent so much time chasing leaks either at stack joints that are now concealed or terrace or balcony conditions at like 3 or 4 way interfaces that can't be exposed, and then it becomes a ripping off the coping and chasing after what might be going on. So I guess is it frustrating from your end when you say we modeled this, we detailed it, we configured the whole thing in 3D, and then either A, they didn't test early enough, or B, the installer didn't follow the instructions?
Yeah, definitely. The good thing, right, it's that we install our units, so the crews report directly to us, so we can have at least a control of most of the installation part of it. Of course, right, you always have some transition with other trades. So those are always tricky, right? So that the early testing, again, it's really, really important. But yeah, we try to minimize it. It's never perfect, right? We find small things here and there, right? But we try to catch them as soon as possible.
And I can imagine it's really problematic if the supplier, manufacturer, and the installer are not working in tandem, meaning if those scopes are broken out. Sometimes maybe this is just in the window industry. I see people wanting to buy window material direct and then having some random installer or carpenter put in the windows, not fully understanding sort of the craftsmanship required on site. And I have seen unitized jobs where the installation and curtain wall contracting were split apart, and I
Yeah.
think that causes big problems.
Yeah, you need a really strong partnership. If you have the fabricator that is different from the installer, you need a solid relationship, a solid track history, right? Because they need to know the system. They need to know the ins and outs. Otherwise, yes, you can end up in these tricky conditions, and yeah, it's an extra layer of coordination that needs to happen.
All right, Andrea, this was a fun conversation. I appreciate you coming on. I know you speak at a lot of industry events. Is there anything coming up that you want to share that you'll be participating in?
There are definitely a lot of events coming right in 2025. We're probably going to do some Facade Plus, Zach coming. We have a Society of Facade Engineering, where I'm co-chair. So we'll definitely do also some new events there as well. As I mentioned at the beginning, we're working really hard on sustainable facades, high performance facades. So we're definitely trying to promote, for example, our closed cavity system that really, in our opinion, can deliver really high level performance to meet, like the Boston building code with the backstops, but still have that high window to wall ratio that architects really, really like sometimes, right? So that, and then our environmental product declaration for custom facades, and trying to lower our embodied carbon. So kind of a lot of themes that we're going to touch upon in the new year in trade shows and conferences, because we really want to bring new energy and new things to the market.
Absolutely. All right, Andrea, thanks for coming on.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Be well.